Okay, first things first, weather's nice enough, all the windows are open. I can't control what the hell happens outside, so if you hear shit in the background, just deal with it. Second of all, I have to give special props to my fiance. She's put up with me since my back surgery, helped me with everything, and regretfully, I'm no longer 7 feet tall. I can no longer walk through walls. I can no longer see in the dark. I gotta admit, I think the pain I'm feeling in my back and leg right now would kill one of you mortal men. I, however, have risen above the occasion and am dealing with the pain like a true warrior, which loosely translates to I cry like a little bitch to my fiance, and somehow that makes me feel a little bit better. So, special thank you and props to my fiance. She's dealing with her own problems after her accident, and somehow still she manages to take care of me like no one else ever could. So, I love you, babe. Okay, enough of that sentimental bullshit. This podcast is going to be about tactical movement across climates and geographical environments. Going back to what I said about the back issue, I have not slept for a good sleep for close to 48 hours. I got about 4 hours of sleep the previous night, and last night I probably got about an hour. So if I'm all over the place, if I drift a little bit, or whatever, like I said, mortal men would have died with that pain. I'm working through it and still recording this podcast. I realized after the podcast yesterday, and I was pointed out by my future son-in-law that I should do a podcast on tactical movement. I have decided that I am going to do one with this crisis series. However, I am not going to get into super technical aspects of it, like squad commands and how to evade, and blah, blah, blah. There's a type of tactical movement that you use with SAR. Those of you unacquainted with it, that would be if you're on some kind of a military search and rescue team. If you're looking for a downed pilot or something, there's another type of movement you must do. It's probably the most dangerous situation you can ever be in. All my respect to the Air Force pararescue or whatever they're calling them these days. Man, that's a shit job. Lots of respect, guys. Back to the podcast, though. Like I said, I don't want this to be one of those discussions where things are said and topics go overlooked or simply ignored because they are hard to picture without graphics. Please be patient. I am going to figure out a way to do this with graphics now that I'm on Patreon, and I'm going to have everybody moving over to Patreon here real soon. You will have a podcast with I'll come up with some kind of code or I don't know what the hell, something, and get everybody over there. And Patrick, if you email me again, I will be happy to set you up with a free membership, not just a temporary membership. So all my loyal listeners and Patrick, you know who you are. Email me again. Let me know you're still listening, and I'll set you up with a free membership. We got a lot coming up. I finally got a hold of this knuckle dragger. Who am I kidding? It's my son-in-law. He knows weapons. He has weapons. He's very good with them. From what I understand, I've seen him shoot, and now that he's shooting speed gun courses, he's getting better. He knows more about AR-15s than I ever will, and I went through the armorers training. Of course, we were using M16A1s and 45s when I was in. Yes, that dates me, but deal with it. I was actually in when we transitioned from the 45 to the 9mm piece of shit, and also when we transitioned from the M16A1 to the M16A2. I did happen to like the A2 better. But I really want to incorporate graphics and everything, so I want you guys to all move over to Patreon. And like I said, I will come up with some kind of a loyal whatever. I'll probably still do them on the current platform that you're listening to it on. But like I said, we are going to be shifting to Patreon. Loyal listeners that have already joined or that are already following me, you will get a free membership. And again, I will be figuring out a way to incorporate graphics so we can do maybe whiteboard or even videos. So I'm working on it. So if I bored you there, wake the hell up. This is really good information, especially if you have a family or whatever. I'm not joking when I said in the description for this podcast, tactical movement individually is awesome. Depending on how good you are at it, you could probably walk right through somebody's picnic and they wouldn't even know it. However, moving with a family, with kids in tow, it's like trying to nail jello to a tree, guys, gals, whoever's listening. It does take practice. I'm also going to situate this or direct this towards cold weather training, because the last training we did was cold weather training. When we get into more fair weather topics, I will be going over tactical movement in more fair weather and more detail, if that makes sense. If you guys think I missed something or I should be doing something, let me know. Don't just sit there and say, why the hell isn't he doing this? Or, bitching to each other about I missed something or I should have done a podcast on this. Let me know. I'm only human. I'm happy to do a topic on it. And if I will be completely honest with you, if I don't know about it, very much about it, I will come out and tell you. I will research it and I'll put something together and we'll learn it together. So rather than, pointing a finger and saying, well, you don't know how to do this, you can't even do a podcast. I can do a podcast on anything. I can do a podcast on your grandpa taking his shit if I want to. So you let me know if it's something I'm not trained in. I'm happy to learn it. And we'll go from there. I got a lot of time. I'm sitting on my ass because of my back, or laying out cold, because of my back. So I got time to study everything. Let's get back to the podcast. Tactical movement is a disciplined and deliberate process of navigating terrain while maintaining awareness, conserving energy, and minimizing risk. It is not simply traveling from one point to another. It really is the application of strategy under pressure, which is a great way to do it. If like we were talking about, I hate the idea of bugging out. I really do. But I connected the dots with a little bit of help. If you're in a natural disaster, like a catastrophe or something like that, and you got to get out of the city. Say you were bugging in for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, food's getting a little funny, blah blah blah, and let me preface this with what we're going to do. We're going to get to a stash, what stash points are, how to do a stash point, and what goes into a stash point. So when I say tactical movement out of a city to a safer location, you're going to a stash point. Some people call them assembly points, which I don't think I think assembly point is a different thing than a stash point, and I'll go into that a little bit on another podcast. But you got to get out of the city, because now the bad guys are moving in looking for food and light bulbs or whatever the hell bad guys look for. I don't know. I'm not a bad guy. And you got to get out with kids and your family and your wife and possibly your parents and your cat and your goldfish and your ferrets and I personally, I just feed the ferrets to a dog, but that's just me. In both survival and military context, movement determines outcomes, and this is the truth. And think about it by the very definition of that. Movement will determine your outcome. Moving from point A to your stash point successfully determines an outcome. Moving from your bug-in location to the middle of a bad guy's trap is determining the outcome of a situation. We're trying to go with the first. What am I trying to say? Poor movement leads to exposure, injury, or detection. Well, that's what I just said, basically. Effective movement preserves energy, maintains security, and increases the likelihood of success. I typed this up yesterday when I was feeling a lot better and I wasn't lacking so much sleep. It really does make sense. And by the way, honestly, I'm a 3.8 student in college. I am a 4.0. I have a 4.0 in grammar, literature and everything that has to do with being a geek, with creative writing and everything. So I try not to get too crazy with it, although my mind is in gear to be more professional. If I say it out loud and it sounds like something I wouldn't actually say, I will correct what I was thinking when I typed it. But for the most part, I know you know what I'm saying. If you have questions, email me. This podcast incorporates military principles, team-based movement, and the difference between individual and group tactics across environments. Basically, what that's saying is the God's honest truth is it is literally 127% times harder to move with a group of people that aren't fully trained than it is to move by yourself. If you train your group, the group that's moving, under ideal situations, if you've trained them in different climates, snow, heat, woodland, whatever, if you train, you've taken it 127% and knocked it down to about 50 times harder. It's hard to keep the attention. It's hard to, people are going to want to rest longer than other people. You got to consider all of this when you go to move. It goes without saying, but somehow I feel I must. This needs to be practiced. It needs to be practiced. I'll say it again. It needs to be practiced. You can teach people how to walk through a woodland environment almost silently. When kids learn how to do it, as long as you can hold their attention in that 8 to 10 range, they're frickin' ninjas in the woods when they learn how to walk right in the woods. Less than 8, they see something shiny, they're gone. Elderly, oh God, I don't even know how to tell you to move elderly safely. Just follow this as closely as you can when I'm talking about. You got to get it into your heads that tracking movement, even by the most talented of scouts, is not like it is in the movies. They look at it and they'll say, there's 3 adults, 2 children, a lame dog, and a goldfish, one of the kids is carrying a goldfish. That's not how tracking works. That's bullshit. The most experienced tracker, you get Tonto down off of his horse, and that's not a racial slur. I mean Tonto, like he was with the Long Ranger. Gets down off his horse and goes to track. He's not going to. That's not how you track. It doesn't work like that. Experienced trackers can sometimes range the size of a group and movement and direction of travel. They can range it, but they can't specify, like pinpoint it. The worst part is that any tracker with any experience can tell children, elderly, or lame tracks by the position of the footprint while walking and size of the footprints. It's not likely they can tell the size of the canteen you left at home by your footprints or anything like that, but they can definitely tell if it's a child's footprint, an elderly footprint, or if somebody's walking lame and, like a cleft foot or something like that. This is why we use something, especially in the snow, called a track plan. You don't move close together. Now, the more difficult movement, like with the kids and stuff, of course you're going to have to be closer if you're especially close to them. And listen, if it's a far movement, that kid's got to walk. You can't be carrying that kid, because if you're in charge and you're carrying a kid, you're going to have to stop more, and stopping is dangerous. The longer you can move without stopping, without totally exhausting your group, the better off you are. The longer you move, the better off you are. If the kids can walk, make them walk. Plus, you walking like a ninja goes right out the door when you pick up a 30 or 40 pound kid when you already got a 30 or 40 pound pack on. So these kids are walking in tow, and you're trying to, as many adults as you can, and say teenagers, try to walk in the same path. It will make the footprints a lot harder to determine who's what and where. When we get into more discussion, tactical discussion, and more in-depth discussion, especially in warmer weather, we're going to be talking about J-hooks and things like that. But we're gearing this towards cold weather because we just talked about snow. And when you're using a track plan, you can't do a J-hook, or you're going to lead the enemy right to you, or whoever's coming after you right to you. So no J-hooks in the snow unless you can levitate. I can't stress how hard it is to do this with kids without practicing a little bit. I mean, I don't want you to make it a game, because then, they're going to lose attention when they get bored. But it has to be practiced. And when they lose attention and when they start getting sloppy, you got to stop and get them in line. You're only going to move as slow as the slowest member. So if you have elderly people, you're not going to move fast. Maybe one of them can move fast, like if it's a grandma and a grandpa, but the other one, it's going to be rough. It is really going to be rough. I mean, you got to take this into consideration when planning your route, before you move. This is why when you choose your site, your stash site, you're forced to move into the wilderness. You might want higher ground in a defendable position, but it still must be obtainable by tactical movement by all parties involved. That means, you want steep high ground behind you, and a full field of view below you, if at all possible. That's a slightly defendable position. It's a simplified version of it, but wherever you're moving to, you want to be somewhere where the elderly aren't going to have to get up and move real quick if your position is found. You want something that you can defend if at all possible. We will, like I said, we're going to build on more tactical movement, like J-hook and bounding. But for now, man, we can only work with what we have. It's not completely impossible, but you really need to be very, very careful in planning your routes. If you plan your route, if you know how to read a topo map, you can plan your route a lot more accordingly, a lot more reasonably than if you just get out there and try to make a beeline for where you're going. You never want to move in a straight line. Even with kids and elderly, you don't want to move in a straight line. You have to move in different lines and stuff. Now, I want to go over one thing that's important. You can't just teach people tactical movement, here's how you step, here's how you walk, here's how you look before you step. You're going to go 15 steps and you're going to turn around and look and see if anybody's behind you. There's more to it than that. You also have to teach people during tactical movement how to take, get cover and, hopefully concealment. You have to teach them how to break the track and get off to the sides or whatever. The more able your group is, the further distance I would recommend you have between people. I know it's an extreme case, but too many people too close together, one hand grenade, bad situation. So and I don't think bad guys are going to have grenades by any means. Booby traps possibly. So you really don't want to be walking on top of each other unless you're walking with a kid or helping an elderly person. I would recommend, if people are secure enough to do it, at least 50 feet between each other for tactical movement. All movement, civilian or military, relies on the same core principles. Remember that. So whenever somebody says this is the military way of doing it, it can still be adapted for civilian movement. Back in the day, we talked about situational awareness. Situational awareness during tactical movement is really much, much easier when you're by yourself. I would say that the two best people your group has as far as tactically trained, one in the front and one in the back. It's the only way you're going to get the tactical movement, from point A to point B. How do I want to say it? Safely, I guess. People that are too busy thinking about how they're stepping and how they're walking because they haven't trained enough are going to be shit for realizing if somebody's coming up behind you. So, You can use radios for something like this because you're going to be that far apart, but you're going to have earpieces in. You're not going to be, using the speaker mic, telling the squirrels and the deer and where the buffalo roam what you're doing. You want to be talking on a radio. I would recommend radios for tactical movement if I didn't say that before. Now we talked about stopping when you have to. Okay. Energy management ensures sustainability over time. You're only as slow as your slowest person. If they got to stop and take a break, you got to stop and take a break. If you push them too hard, you're going to have to leave them behind. That's your choice, not mine. I wouldn't push anybody in my group that hard that I have to leave them behind. When you're moving tactically, this goes for day and night. Noise and light, discipline, it goes without saying, are paramount. If you sound like a platoon of skeletons jerking off on a tin roof, walking through the woods, somebody's going to find you. Whereas if you learn how to step in the woods, avoid things that are going to go snap really loud or shake a lot of bushes, you got a much better chance of getting where you're going. If you're not using white light flashlights at night, you got a much better chance of going where you're heading. I had said before, route selection prioritizes safety over cover and efficiency. Route selection with children and elderly. Don't forget that. You need to plan the route accordingly is what I was trying to say. Sorry, I had to step away for a second. I had a text that I had to reply to. Adaptability is going to allow rapid adjustment to changing conditions. Adaptability with the military movement, it's so much easier to say this. With a group, you want them, before you move, you have to even teach them how to pack right. That's what I'm trying to get to. You have to teach them how to set up their packs right. So you want dry socks, maybe a change of shoes, raincoat or a poncho, and like stuff for blisters and stuff like that. I know I'm being extreme, but I always have moleskin right on top of my pack. Whatever pack it is, even my EDC, I have moleskin in it. It's moleskin is paramount on a long walk. People that aren't used to walking far, especially on uneven terrain, are going to get blisters. Blisters can just take a kid out of everything. I mean, once a kid gets blisters on their feet, they are done. So hold on one second. Okay, I'm back, and I'm going to take a big sip of coffee. Oh, holy shit, that's good coffee. So like I was saying, rain gear, moleskin, change of socks. If possible, change of shoes, depending on how you're packing. And even like high-calorie, high-fat, high-protein snacks. It should all be on the top of their pack. When they should be able to reach into it. Somebody should be able to walk up to the back of them and pull out a snack for them if they want something. If it's raining or it's going to rain, somebody should be able to walk up behind them and pull out their raincoat and give it to them so they don't have to. I would recommend a poncho with kids, but they can give it to them or put it on them. That way you don't have to stop for 5 minutes while they dig through their bags. If you look at it from a military standpoint, military doctrine reinforces these ideas with an added emphasis on security, communication, and coordination. Honest to God, it's what we've been talking about for the most point. That's something you learn in the military, and that's why that was in my head, and that was why I typed it. But I'm trying to show the parallels between civilian movement and military movement, and how, real tactical movement, and how you can slightly mirror it to the best of your ability. I am not going to bullshit you and tell you how to move, tactically, one man in shape, trained, and say you just make your kids and the elderly people do that. I'm trying to tell you that you have to adapt everything military for civilian, elderly, and children. So if you're going to take a break every 2 hours as a well-trained adult moving through, and when I say take a break, I mean just stopping to correct for compass bearings and things like that. I'm not talking about putting your feet up and having a beer. I'm talking about correcting compass bearings, not GPS bullshit. You're using a real compass and a topo map if you're a man. You're going to be looking at, water consumption at that point. You're going to hydrate. I don't like to hydrate while I'm walking. I like to hydrate when I stop. I feel it's more effective. And you're going to make relay any, necessary communications if they have to be made. I don't like communications when you're moving, if at all possible, because it takes your mind off of what you're doing. So this can all be adapted to civilians and moving with, like the elderly and the children. You just have to think about it before you move. And this is more important with the family. I'm just going to start saying family. I'm not going to keep saying elderly and children. When you're moving with the family, speed versus stealth, determining whether rapid movement or concealed movement is more appropriate. Again, rapid movement is probably going to be a lot more important than concealed movement because family just can't. I'm going to tell you, they're like a cat, They get their head in a curtain and they think they're hiding and their butt's hanging out. It's the same thing with kids. The cat thinks that they're invisible. They get their head behind a curtain. At least my cat does. I don't know about your cat. But she gets her head in the blinds or the curtain and she thinks she's invisible. And her whole butt's hanging out. It's like, God, you stupid animal. But we're going to talk about bounding overwatch and other tactical movements, and I know it looks like I'm laying off of it or I don't want to do it, but I don't want to confuse what I'm trying to say with real tactical movement. I do want to go over real tactical movement because sometimes, if you're bugging in and you're getting low on stuff, maybe two adults that are trained want to go get water or go get food or whatever. So you should know what bounding overwatch and J-hooks and all that stuff is about. And again, we will go over that. And I know I keep saying it, but I don't want you to tune out because I haven't gone over it. The stuff I'm telling you is extremely important, okay? Honestly, I wouldn't even try to get into that kind of stuff with a family situation. Again, everything we're talking about, if it sounds too military, you can still adapt it for family. And if I missed that when I'm explaining it, I apologize. I do want to go over this, though. This is going to be a breakdown of individual versus team-based movement. I'm going to give you pros and cons, okay? Individual movement prioritizes simplicity and energy conservation. You're a ninja. That's what it boils down to. If you know how to wear the appropriate clothing, you know how to strap down your pack so it's not making any noise and it's basically part of your physiology. If you know how to have the right kind of boots on to walk through the woods, if you're ready for it, you're a ninja, okay? A single person must balance awareness, navigation, and physical effort alone, which I'm willing to accept any day of the week. Decisions are faster, but some capabilities are limited, like if you have 2 or 3 people that know what they're doing and you move like in a triangle or, if you have another way of moving, like somebody's watching your 6, the other person's going forward and you're just hauling balls to get through, much more efficient with 2 people or more. Again, the more people, you're only as fast as your slowest person. That's why I like to do it by myself. Advantages of individual movement are faster decision-making, lower visibility of the person moving, and easier concealment if shit hits a fan. Disadvantages are limited observation. You cannot watch in all directions. I don't care how good you are. No support in emergencies. It's you, man. You're out there by yourself. And you're going to increase the fatigue because, you're going to have increased fatigue because you're going to be moving a lot faster if you're by yourself. You're not going to be moving as slow. Advantages of team movement. Now, this is with, again, a tactical team, not the family, but this can be adapted. Advantages of team movement would be a shared workload, which means if you got to carry some ruddy little 3-year-old's pack, or that's way too young, let's say 6-year-old's pack, because they just don't feel like carrying it anymore, you can take turns carrying it. That you'd be surprised how much people want to drop their packs when they're moving. That goes for all adults. Hell, if I'm going far enough, I want to drop my damn pack. You have increased situational awareness. I mean, a lot of elderly still have good eyes and good ears. If you're on point and you're pulling through the trees with your parents, your grandfather or your grandmother or, somebody, they might pick up on something that you didn't hear or see because they're watching the six. Now, again, you're going to be moving slow as shit, but you're better off moving slow as shit and knowing something's there than moving fast as shit and being overtaken. Again, if when we say family, if they're capable of carrying a weapon and they know how to shoot, you've also got the advantage to provide security and assistance, especially if one of them's like a nurse or something, man. That's the way to go. That's baller, man. You got a nurse in your group or a physician's assistant or something like that, man, I could take on the world with a good physician's assistant and one or two Marine grunts. I'm telling you, we'd already have Iran under control. Disadvantages of team movement. It's going to be slower movement. Duh. No shit. Why did I even put that in there? You're going to have increased noise and visibility. Unavoidable. You just have to accept it. That needs to be built into when you're planning your route. And while we're on this, okay, let me go. More need for coordination and communication. Let's go into this increased noise and visibility and like when you're planning your route. When you plan your route, you always have to have a oh shit way out. Say your route looks good and you went out and scouted it out the day before, 2 days before, and it looked good, and you've got everybody out there, grandma and grandpa are having a good old time. You're moving through the woods. Your 6-year-old is beating your 3-year-old with a stick, but who gives a shit? 3-year-old's a brat. And then you realize you come up to a convoy or something on the path, like right along the path that you're walking, or there's a group that's got a camp. There's a camp set up, and you don't know if it's friend or foe. Now you got to stop and think. Now you got to redirect. So you always have to have an oh shit way out. Always. Don't just plan one route. Plan multiple routes. Reorienting from multiple positions. And that's just, we're getting really deep. That's going to be for the advanced stuff. But when you have a team, you're going to assign roles. I'm sorry to say it, but kids, elderly, everyone has to have a role. You're trying to create rear security, avoid getting flanked, and you're just trying to maximize effectiveness with what you've been given. Now, urban movement with team tactics, a whole different situation, but let's go over it. Urban environments amplify the importance of teamwork. Well, I don't. Every textbook is going to say that. Everybody is training you normally is going to say that. I'm saying it because it's true. It goes without saying. However, I don't know that it amplifies it. I think it's important in every kind of movement that you do. I don't want to make it sound like, urban, we got to train differently. No, you're going to train for everything. If you're going to train for tactical movement, you're training for everything. It's all important. Let's go with the scenario. A small group must move through a damaged city following a disaster. Instead of moving as a cluster, the group spreads out slightly to reduce risk. One individual watches forward movement. Another monitors the rear. Others observe the flanks and upper levels, windows, rooftops, and stairwells. Hey, well, I got you. Listen, watch like some bullshit Mel Gibson movie or, one of these modern, super badass movies with pistols and shit, and they're moving through buildings and clearing rooms and these bullshit police stories on TV. God, I hate these police series on TV. Watch them move through a building or something. They never look up. They rarely, if ever, look up. They rarely, if ever, pressure check their weapons. They rarely do anything, and I find it comical because they have all these, what do you call them? Not assistants, but professional advisors. They have all these professional advisors. I don't know what they're advising them of. I mean, every time you have a cop go into a building with their shotgun, every time they move, pretty much every time they move after a long stop, they rack around in the shotgun. What the hell are they doing with the round that was in the shotgun already when they racked it the previous 3 times? This is a pet peeve of mine, and that's why I don't watch this shit. It's all bullshit. I think Star Wars is more realistic than some of these police stories. That one my fiance was watching, man, I don't know, it was a police story. It might have been one of those firemen fire stories, which is even worse sometimes. But the same fire department had to deal with a meteorite shower, a tidal wave, and an earthquake within the span of 3 episodes. Now, I'm going to leave it at that. That's how ridiculous this shit gets. Okay. Let's go back. I'm going to read that last one again. Others observe flanks, upper levels, windows, rooftops, and stairwells. This is going to involve a lot of training, but you can do this with the family. If you don't have like little ones, like real little ones, but you have like teens, like your wife, significant other, husband, I don't know, whatever, is able-bodied, you can do this. This is doable. Your person, your person on forward movement, they've got a job to do. They're going to be looking. They're going to be watching. They're going to be 360 degrees. But the people that are watching flanks and upper levels, they might pick something up, because the way it works in guerrilla warfare is if you've got a team movement and you're moving into one area and there's one, there's an obvious team movement, that person's going to sit in hiding and let the body of the movement get into their kill zone, their kill box. They're not going to just take out the first person they see. That's bullshit, because then they've given away their position. Good guerrilla warfare is going to let the body of the movement move into the killing box, and then they're going to open fire. That's why even after the first person is observing, 360, the people that are watching flanks in the middle before the person in the back is going to be looking up, looking sideways, looking up, down, underground, whatever. Movement often follows. Oh boy, I'm tired. Movement often follows leapfrog or bounding pattern. Again, we're going to get into that. That takes some training, and I don't know that that's something you can do with kids or elderly, to be honest with you. But if you have all able-bodied people and you train, you can do that. I find it to be highly effective, and it's something we practice extensively. Intersections are approached cautiously. One person observes while others cross. That's the official law enforcement military training. One person's going to watch while the others cross. And when the first one gets across, then you have 2 people watching, because you have the one on the side that needs to cross and you have the one on the side that's already crossed. Now you get 2 people watching. That's not something you need special training for. It's just common sense. Communication may be verbal, but in high-risk environments, hand signals, prearranged cues are preferred. I really like a throat mic with an earpiece. Hand signals can create confusion. Even with the best of trained people, hand signals can create confusion, especially if I throw a hand signal out, you weren't really paying attention, you look over and wait for me to do it again. I thought you had the signal, and I move, and you didn't know what I was doing, and now we're separated. So I prefer a good throat mic and an earpiece. This is when we're going to be doing a module in communication, obviously, coming up, maybe even next. If I can get my son-in-law on this weekend, my future son-in-law, I consider him my son, but if we can get my future son-in-law on this weekend, we're going to talk about pew-pews. I can do communications and radios after that. Urban terrain rewards coordination. Groups that move without structure often become disorganized and vulnerable, which ties into like the hand signal bullshit I was just talking about. And keep in mind, like I said, I typed this up. These were cognizant thoughts I was having while I was trying to put this together when I was already working on less than 24 hours of sleep. We're at 48 right now for the most part, and I think I'm holding it together pretty good. So just hang in there. We're well over halfway done. This is again an ideal situation. Moving with communications, trained individuals, lots of cover and concealment along the route. It never works like that in real life. That's why you have to train for shits. There's also booby traps, and now that I think about it, we're probably going to have to do a podcast about booby traps, because that's a reality. That's something you could encounter. That's something you could encounter and actually a decent situation where you don't have to bug out. You're just out looking for food, and there's no threat. There's no, bad guys with sniper rifles, beaming in on your favorite, head. There's booby traps can be left and abandoned. I have personal feelings about booby traps that I'll go into when we go over booby traps. But they do exist, and they're very difficult. If you know how to place a booby trap, they are very difficult to detect. So we'll get into that. Now, what I'm trying to do from the last podcast right now is where we tie it in. Cold weather movement with teams. Cold environments increase the importance of group coordination. That's why I'm saying, you got to train in the cold. You can't train in the summertime for cold weather. You got to train in the cold because it changes everything. Cold changes everything. For example, let's go with the scenario to get this going so you can understand more what I'm trying to say. I did a scenario of a small group is traveling through snow-covered terrain. Breaking a trail in deep snow is physically exhausting, especially for small children, well, especially for family. All right. Teams rotate the lead position to distribute the effort because that point position in snow, it's like walking in peanut butter after a while, man. Observation is shared. If you're moving in the daytime, you got to have sunglasses on in snow. You do not want to be spending a lot of time moving in snow without sunglasses on because that glare is going to give you a migraine type headache that only a bullet's going to cure. You're going to feel like you have like somebody threw sand in your eyes, and your vision's going to be useless. You can't look down the sights of a barrel or a pistol once you get snow blind. It just doesn't work. Your observation, like I said, is going to be shared, but everybody's going to have sunglasses or at least slick glasses on. Slick glasses are when you take a pair of normal glasses and you put something on so you can only see through a narrow slit. Trust me, there's going to be enough light coming in if you're moving in the daytime. If you're in a safe condition and you're moving in snow in the daytime, slick glasses work fine. Pacing becomes critical. The group must move at a rate that prevents sweating while maintaining warmth. Okay, we were talking about cold the last time, keeping your body core temperature and yada yada. I'll give you a good example. When we were doing cold weather training in, what was that called? Nyanmachi Prefecture with the Japanese Self-Defense Force. We were the first unit to train with the Japanese since we dropped the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Needless to say, tensions were high when we started. And I want to tell you something. The Japanese are excellent at cold weather combat. I won't even say we compare to them in the slightest. The Japanese have the cold weather combat down to a science. We can only hope they're on our team if it breaks down and if shit goes down and we're out there in the sticks fighting for real. We want the Japanese on our side because they are freaking snow ninjas, man. And that's not a racial slur. I know ninjas are Japanese. I'm just saying they're incredible in the snow. You could walk right past one and you wouldn't even know it. They're that good with the camouflage. And I know people say it all the time, oh, ghillie suit. Yeah. No, I'm serious. You can be looking right at them and you wouldn't see them. What was I getting at? Holy shit. Oh, the reason why you're pacing yourself so you don't sweat so bad. We basically cross-country skied across Japan. That's what it felt like, at least. But I know we covered a good chunk of Japan, the northern part of Japan. And we were sweating so hard cross-country skiing. Now, this is the best shape of our lives. We were sweating so hard that when we would stop, it was so cold that our uniforms and our cold weather gear that we were wearing, the clothing, would freeze. And we would have to break the ice in our clothing, bending our arms and our legs, to pop the frozen joints to move again. That's how cold it was, and that's how hard we were sweating. I'm going to tell you, don't work that hard with family. You're going to travel even less. So what you might be able to do on your own in 2 to 3 hours could take 3 days with a family. I'm sorry, but that's a cold, hard truth. You want to get everybody there in one piece alive without heart attacks, because heart attacks are common in cold weather. You're going to go slow. You're going to go deliberate, and man, it's so noisy. I don't know what to tell you. This is one of those things where you're just going to go for it. There's no way to move quiet in deep snow. There isn't. Not with family, at least. You're going to be checking on everyone regularly, making sure they're functioning properly, and making sure they're hydrating. The problem with cold weather injuries is that when hypothermia starts to set in, you don't even know it. You have no idea that I would notice that you had hypothermia before you did. That's one of the big problems with hypothermia. The other problem you're going to have is if you push too hard and you start wearing gear down, you're looking at frostbite. Man, that is something you don't want to deal with either. Frostbite, I mean, if you guys want to go over that, what you do with frostbite, how to avoid it, and first aid, you let me know and we'll go over it. I don't want to right now because it's going to turn this 35, 40-minute podcast into a 2-hour podcast. Cold weather injuries are a bitch. This is one of these things where if somebody goes down, the whole team helps, especially if they got to drag them. Luckily, it's a lot easier to drag in the snow than it is to drag through a woodland or desert or something like that. You can make a makeshift sled out of a poncho and a couple sticks and drag them through the snow very easily. Also, it will cover your track plan, which is a plus. You got a plus out of somebody, passing out. The group must also manage increased visibility. Yeah, you're going to be visible. Tracks are going to be noticeable, a lot more noticeable. Track plan is extremely important if it's a larger group. You want everybody walking in the same track plan that the first person painstakingly made for you. The more people that walk through the track plan, the easier it's going to be to walk. So you would be putting the younger and the elderly all the way in the back. It's going to be easier for them to walk through the snow that, us hard chargers have already walked through and made a path, especially if it's like more than 6 or 8 inches deep. We're talking about 2 feet of snow. You're not going to move children and elderly through that. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. So this is all stuff that needs to be incorporated into the move. And again, I'm going to say it again. It's very noisy to move through snow. Sound travels across snow, especially like if it's ice covered. Sound will travel across that snow like it travels across water. It'll go twice as far, twice as loud. So you need to be aware of noise discipline when moving in the snow. Very aware. Let's talk about like a team that's been moving through a city. You bugged in for about a week or two, and then you got to move out again. You're transitioning from urban to snow. Now, if you packed correctly, and you have a big enough pack, that's going to work. Here's the problem. If you're packing for urban conditions and, it's fall and you don't have that freak snowstorm and you're packing your moderate cold weather equipped, you get snow and it gets really bad and you're only packing and wearing clothing for moderate cold, you're not moving through the snow unless it's a very short distance to your next position where you would have the cold weather gear. I'd recommend you go back to where you started if possible and get your cold weather gear. You don't want to try to move into snow with moderate cold weather gear because you're not going to wear heavy cold weather gear to move through a city. You just don't do it. That's stupid. That's like a skateboard with square wheels. You don't do it. If you have to transition into cold weather with moderate cold weather gear from an urban environment, look for places where you're going to have cover. Or look for getting underneath pine trees and shit like that where there isn't going to be any snow. There's just going to be a lot of pine needles and stuff that you can get into and cover up with and, try to stay warm. You're not going to move past that. You want to try to sit in place and wait out whatever caused you to move. Trying to hold my thoughts together here because the paperwork's getting dizzy. It's just actually getting like blurry on me because I'm so tired. Let's just wrap this up because I know I'm getting tired and I don't want to sound nonsensical. Tactical movement is a system of awareness, discipline, and coordination. We covered that already. I'm covering it again. It's not just going from point A to point B. It's not just bearing down and pushing through. There's a lot of shit going on. You need to train for it. Tactical movement you need to train for. You can't watch a movie, You can't watch Mission Impossible and now you're trained. It doesn't work like that. This takes a lot of practice, and it takes practice with everyone, not just the person that's going to be in charge. If you can stick as close as you can to the military principles we spoke of, you're going to have a lot more success, because there's going to be more structure, better communications, and better shared responsibilities. Individual movement offers speed and simplicity. The team movement provides more security, being that people are able-bodied and armed. But what I'm going to talk about right now is something that needs to be considered. If it's about a 2-hour movement and you have a family and you got to get from point A to point B and you think you have a good route figured out, leave your family behind and cover the route yourself. Make sure it's safe. Make sure you can move through there fairly quickly. You're going to know how quiet people are going to have to be. You're going to know how much visibility you're going to be exposed to. You're going to know the terrain difficulty. You're going to know everything before you move with a group of people. If you're responsible for a large group of people and you're not familiar with that terrain, you're going to have about 20 oh shits every minute. So, if you can plan movement for like 2 hours at a time, it's safe, and you're not being tracked or chased down or something like that, you do it first. Get familiar with it. Leave markers, not highly visible markers, only things you and your team members would know to look for. Leave markers in case somebody gets separated. I mean, this is good, solid team movement. Consider all of it, but move it yourself. Don't drag everybody through there blind, just looking at a terrain map. Do it yourself first. Things change. Definitely get everybody through it first. I'm going to tell you to avoid movement in an urban environment with families if at all possible. Even if you got to go sideways or backwards a little bit, get out of the city as quickly as possible and get into the woods. Cities, if lights are working or something like that, the shadows are 3 times longer, when you're running down a road or moving through a street, or you can do it by yourself a hell of a lot easier than with a family. And there is no safe urban transitional movement with a group of people. Urban movement in a time of crisis is very, very tricky. So keep that in mind. I'm just talking this movement that I'm talking about mostly is about through the woods, through the mountains, through the snow, stuff like that. Urban movement is a bitch. It is a bitch with people. It's just not safe. It's too easy to get separated. Remember, again, this is another thing to keep in mind. Make a mental note of it, or, carve it in your arm. I don't care. But your cold weather environments are going to take twice as much energy, twice as many calories, twice as much protein, and twice as much H2O. You're going to be sweating harder even though you don't feel it because you're cold. You're going to be burning more calories just trying to keep your extremities and your core temperature up. In cold weather training, no, actually it was a mountain warfare training, but it was freaking cold. What the hell beep now? I swear to God, I set this up so nothing would beep while I was talking, and something's beeping. Piss me off. When we would be ready to go to mountain warfare training, they would load us up with a huge breakfast. And then, those iced honey buns, one of my favorite things in the whole world. We would get 2 of them on a separate plate, or a separate tray covered in maple syrup to get our calorie count up for the cold weather that we were about to, hit while we were doing mountain warfare training. And we were still depleting all the calories we were given. We would eat a breakfast that you could feed 3 people with easily, maybe 4. That many calories, that much protein. And we would be drinking water. They'd make us drink like 3 or 4 canteens before we even started out. We would use all that water. You wouldn't have to piss. You'd be, we would come up on lunch hungry. We were tired. We depleted everything. We'd do late lunches, but we would come up on lunch starving hungry because we worked that hard in the cold weather, whether we were climbing rock faces or, skiing or ski joring or whatever it was we were doing. Cold weather is a bitch. put me at the beach in a warm environment any day of the week. And I agree. You see that cabin on a lake and it's snowing, and you see the trees covered, and you got that beautiful lake, and maybe there's a couple of deer off to the side. Show it to me in a postcard while I'm sitting on the beach. I really don't want to be there. I don't want to brag, but I'm really good at mountain warfare and anything that has to do with woodland survival and combat, but I hate it. I would rather be on the beach any day of the week, living in a box on the beach in a nice cabin in the woods any day of the week. Wow, did I get off topic. Your group is going to need to be trained to adapt. Of course, the younger and the older, it's going to be freaking impossible, but the responsible members in the group that are going to be part of the team movement, part of the decision making and the effectiveness of the team movement, they all need to be able to adapt very quickly. They need to be able to transition weapon systems. That's something you got to train people to do in different environments. Sometimes you got to crawl through shit where you got to drag your pack. What weapons up front with you? Do you have your rifle strapped to your pack and you got your Glock in while you're crawling through the rocks and the trees, or you got your rifle with you and you dropped your belt so you're not getting snagged on stuff. That's all inside your pack now. You need to be able to transition from one weapon to another very quickly. This is all stuff that must be practiced. I say make it fun, if possible, but that takes away from the seriousness. You can't make it too much fun. Make it reward-based, not fun while you're training. Make the training reward-based. If somebody does better than somebody else, get them a freaking pizza or buy them a beer, whatever. But you got to practice. You want to practice cold weather survival, cold weather movement, blah, blah, blah. Practice it in cold weather. Remember, I'm going to leave this one thing. The people that move the most effectively are not just reacting to the environment. They are actively managing it. They're managing their temperature, their sound, their light, and their, like I said, their sound, their noise. They're the most effective in moving through any environment. So let's close with that. I'm really freaking tired. I'm out of, well, no, there's still, hold on. The last sip of coffee is like the saddest thing in the world. Looking at the bottom of an empty coffee mug. I'm ready to go jump off a cliff. I'm out of coffee. Listen, I'm serious about you guys sending me things you want to train on. And again, if I don't have it, if I've never been trained in it, I will find out about it. I will talk to people that are trained with. I'll track somebody down. I will get you good information. I won't lead you astray. I'm trying to train you all into 365, all terrain, all weather, freaking ninja commandos here. You got to keep your family alive. You got to keep the people you're responsible for alive. That means you got to take this shit serious. If you want to learn, I will find a way to train. If I don't know, but I got to tell you, I've been trained in a lot. There's not going to be a lot that I haven't been trained in. So get a hold of me. I'm not asking for money. It's actually going to give me a topic to train on. I'm running out of shit in my mind. I have like 15 more, and that's as much as I could come up with for right now. So for right now, family first. Pray for the Marines and the sailors heading into the Gulf, that Strait of Hormuz and that little Kurd island. Our Marines are going to make a lot of widows. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be a lot of widows running around Iran, and all human life is precious, but some, man, let Allah sort them out. They're screwing up. They're screwing up, and I don't mean to get political, but they were offered a way out, and it sounds like they're going to refuse it. So what's going to happen is going to happen. Drop the hammer, get this over with, bring our troops home safe, and, start doing what we used to do. When you see a veteran, I don't care how old they are. I don't care if they're on a respirator. When you see an old man with a veteran's hat on or a veteran's jacket on, you better start walking up to them and shaking their hands and thanking them for their service. You look at how some of these other countries are under Sharia law, things like that. Those veterans are why we're not living like that. The older veterans, and I'm not talking about like me. I'm talking about men older than me that the greatest generation, the World War II, if they're still alive, the Vietnam vets. Some of them were recruit. They were what was that when they mandatory conscribed them? The draft card. They didn't have a choice, but damn it, they went. They did their job. If you find out somebody says, "Hey, no, I volunteered. I knew the draft was coming down. I just volunteered." Hey, man, you stop and you shake that man's hand. You buy him a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven or something like that. I am forever when I go out. If I'm at the gas station and there's a veteran, behind me, I'll just tell the girl, I'm going to stand off to the side. I'll buy him his coffee and his bag of chips or whatever it is. You owe them a debt of gratitude. They're the reason why I know what I know, because we trained on what they trained on. We improved it, but we used their training. There's still tactics that were used from way long ago that we still use in modern warfare. So again, start thanking your older veterans. Start thanking any veterans, but especially the elderly. They're getting up to that big, chow hall in the sky real soon. Thank them before they go. You have no idea how much it means to them. Just a simple gesture like that. All my Marines Semper Fi. Get done, get home. Sailors, you got them over there. God bless you. And them crazy pilots, man. Whew. If you knew how crazy some of these pilots are, but I love them all. They're getting the Marines on the ground. They're the ones that are going to take them. So God bless them too. That's enough banner. Just y'all watch your six. Think about what I talked about. You want me to send you some diagrams or something? I can draw some stuff up and send it an email if you need it. I'm happy to do it, especially if it has to do with the children and the elderly. We got so much we can train on. You just got to tell me what you want. If I haven't touched on it, or if I have it in line, I'll just say thank you and it's your idea and I'll let you take credit for it. But Hail Patrick, you reached out to me once, reach out again. What training do you want? I know I'm picking on Patrick, but he sent me a nice response to email I sent him. So Patrick, you're a legend and a hero in my mind. Y'all watch your six, and especially in these times, start praying. Do not shy away from God in a time like this. And I don't mean to preach, but we're in a situation where we're praying for those Marines and those sailors to come home safe. So drop to a knee, say a prayer, and thank God it's them and not you. And peace out.